What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. So here's the thing. While everyone's been obsessing over the ambiguous remarks of Trump, whether America is sending tomahawks or not, something far more important slipped under the radar. At the Eastern Economic Forum, Russia's financial wizard, German Gref, did the unthinkable. He publicly disagreed with Vladimir Putin. Yes, you heard that right. The head of Sberbank, the guy who practically runs the country's money machine, told Putin that the economy is stagnating. And Putin, in all his imperial glory, waved him off like an annoying mosquito, saying it's not a stagnation, it's just a planned cooldown. Planned? Like the special military operation was planned till last week. Good question. What we're actually watching is the slow implosion of Putin's economic model, a regime that survives by spending borrowed money to buy loyalty, fund war, and pretend that collapse is just technical stagnation. And even if the man, personally installed by Putin himself to watch over the economy, cannot convince Vladimir Vladimirovich that things are catastrophic, no one else will. I mean, just who? Nabiulna, she tried. It's like watching your house on fire and your best friend tells you to call the firefighters and start filling the buckets with water, but instead you reply that, don't worry, the weather forecast predicted 10% chance of rain, you will see, it will happen, everything will be normal, no need to panic. And as the house starts to already fall apart, you blame your best friend for starting the fire in the first place, so he can publicly shame you of incompetence. Welcome to Putin's Russia 2000 to 2025 edition. And counting. Let's talk about everything that's happening and about to happen in today's video. At the heart of Putin's system lies a paradox. It's not money that buys power. It is power that prints money. This is a reverse oligarchy, a ridiculous machine where loyalty trumps competence, and loyalty is rewarded then with fortunes. At first, of course. Then we all know what happens to people who spend their lives being loyal to Putin. But anyways, you're not rich because you are smart or useful. You're rich because you bow down deep enough. The higher your devotion, the fatter is your bank account. It is a pyramid scheme held together by corruption and fear. And like all pyramid schemes, it is expensive to maintain and is certainly doomed to fail, at some point in the future at least, when its foundation, for example, begins to shake. The war in Ukraine did not just create this system, it just exposed it. Every bomb dropped, every drone launched, every coffin returned, all of it comes with a price tag. Putin cannot afford loyalty unless he pays for it, and he cannot pay for it unless he borrows. That is precisely why everyone who touches the war economy, from soldiers to construction workers in occupied cities, is cashing in like it is a gold rush, at least for now. A guy who used to be making 30,000 rubles a month as a janitor suddenly gets a 3 million ruble signing bonuses to go die in Donetsk. The widow of a dead soldier gets millions and a promise that her kid can study for free in a country where education has been methodically gutted. Engineers, handymen, even painters hired to restore Mariupol are getting salaries they could never dream of. And up top, the elites who lost yachts to sanctions are raking in billions through so-called import substitution, fake drone factories, and then stolen Western assets. Everyone in the system, from the trenches to the Kremlin, gets a cut, on paper at least. While in reality, trenches do give up most of their wealth to feed the Kremlin even more. But, well, that's another story that we discussed several times in the past already. What's the main problem then? Well, to keep everyone loyal, Putin has to keep paying. And when loyalty is your currency, inflation hits harder than any drone strike. Yet, so far, magically the Russian economy still stands somehow. Are financial wizards really that smart, or is it just pure luck? Let's try to answer this question in our next chapter. Let's talk about how this fantasy economy actually works. It is not fueled by innovation, productivity, or trade. It is fueled by debt, denial, and delusion. 3D. For the first 2 years of the war, Russia surfed a wave of oil money, courtesy of Western sanctions that did not quite sanction enough. The government was swimming in cash, boasting a budget surplus, when the ruble became even somewhat attractive on the forex market. Putin walked around like he just cracked the code of finances. Then the cash inevitably dried up, and when that happened, the Kremlin reached for the oldest trick in the dictator's handbook: print debt and call it prosperity. Well, you know that thing that pretty much every single kid in the world says at least once. I personally did it when I was maybe like 6 or 7. Why cannot we just print more money and give it to everyone? Well, that's almost exactly what Putin did. The money did not go to everyone, of course, it just ended up in the pockets of Putin's favorite people and industries. But the outcome was and will still most certainly be the same. In more complicated financial terms, this is what they did. They started issuing federal bonds, and here's the funny part, I guess. Then they forced banks to just buy them. The central bank kept raising the key rate to control inflation, but that only made bank deposits skyrocket in return. The banks, drowning in cash they could not lend, had to show it all into government debt. So the state became the biggest investor in its own collapsing economy and the biggest debtor in the same time. Absolutely outrageous situation suitable for only the economy on the brink of financial destruction. To make it simple, just picture these guys. The government borrows 100 rubles to fund the war. Next year, it needs another 16 rubles, 16% interest rate, just to pay the interest on that 100 rubles. But to get that 16 rubles, it has to borrow again, at even higher rate, and so on. It's a hamster wheel powered by IOUs, and well, Putin's economy is just an acetone engine. Looks like it's running, smells like it's running, but it's melting from the inside. Because every ruble spent on this war comes from borrowed money. Every bond bought is a failure bill to be paid. The central bank keeps the key rate high to keep up the appearances, while the real economy breathes dry. And the result? A government that's technically solvent but spiritually bankrupt, borrowing money from itself just to pay the interest on yesterday's lies. We spoke about this 100 rubles example, now just multiply it by billions and trillions. Now that's devastating. That's pretty much exactly what German Gref tried to tell Putin. In much simpler terms, of course, something like economy is bad, inflation is high, stop printing money, or we destroy everything. But well, Putin did not buy this nonsense, and as he usually will not. So let's just talk about the confrontation between Putin and his main financier in our next chapter. Now we get to the main event, the duel at the Eastern Economic Forum. Picture this. German Gref, calm and clinical, stating the obvious. The economy is stagnating. In any other country, that's a factual statement. In Putin's Russia, it's blasphemy. The cameras zoom in, the tensions rise, and then Putin leans forward, smirking like a man who just been told gravity does not apply to him, and pretty much says, no, that's not a stagnation, he insists. It's a planned cooldown. Planned cooldown. That's a phrase only a man who has never balanced a checkbook could ever invent. What makes this moment so revealing is not just the content, but the format. Gref was not giving advice behind closed doors. He had to go public, because that's the only way anyone can reach Putin today. Think about it. The head of Russia's largest bank, one of the last sane technocrats left standing, has to stage a live-streamed intervention to tell the emperor he is naked. And then what does the emperor do? He just doubles down. According to Putin's logic, everything is fine. The stagnation, planned. The inflation, controlled. The debt spiral, strategic. The drone factory is built with fake steel and unpaid labor. That's innovation, apparently. He genuinely believes that by sheer force of will, he can bend the laws of the economics to his narrative. He thinks losing half his oil revenue, draining the National Wealth Fund, and then buying ammunition from North Korea are all temporary inconveniences, so-called bumps on the road to grand victory. And maybe the most dangerous part, he believes his own story. He looks at the numbers, shrinking budgets, rising deficits, collapsing ruble, it's all in front of him, and still thinks he's winning. He's living in a parallel reality economy built on selective perception and blind faith. But that's exactly why this is happening. The only way a person is delusional to obvious is if he unconditionally believes his own lies. Here is the brutal truth. The Russian economy is already eating itself alive. The federal budget is hemorrhaging 0.5% of GDP every month. The banks are running out of oxygen. The government is borrowing at 16% just to pay for last year's war bills. And when the bills come due, because they always do, the options are grim. Either they default or they print even more money and drown in hyperinflation. Either way, the ruble is doomed. But this is not just about numbers, it's about survival. Once the money stops flowing, the loyalty dries up. Remember, we mentioned this in the beginning of the video. The regions already choking under debt will have to cut welfare programs and cancel salaries. The people who used to enlist voluntarily for bonuses, for debt forgiveness, or even for hope, they will vanish. That is when Putin will reach for his last resort, forced mobilization. The moment the cash incentives collapse, the war will become mandatory. Because what else can he do when his army is broke, his banks are empty, and his illusion of control is cracking? Economists like Yanis Kluge already see it. August saw, for example, 35,000 new contracts signed, just half of what the Kremlin wanted. They cannot recruit faster, even after allowing hepatitis and HIV patients to enlist. They cannot produce more drones because their industry is hollow. The war's tempo is no longer dictated by ambition. It is dictated by math, simple math. And math does not bend to propaganda. It follows its own rules. Putin can still order missile strikes, still raise pay for soldiers, still even issue grand speeches about victory, but the machine is sputtering. The fuel is gone, the gears are grinding, and somewhere in the background even his loyalists, like from Gref to governors, are beginning to whisper what no one dares to say loud. This cannot last. So, where does that all leave us? With a ruler trapped in his own fairy tale, convinced he can bankroll eternity with IOUs and dead men. Gref's long overdue warning was not a rebellion, it was a cry into the void. The technocrats know that the game is over. The economists see the writing on the wall. The soldiers see it in their own empty wallets. And the only one who does not see anything, it's the man in charge. Well, there you have it, guys. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. If you wish to support our work and help us stay independent, please consider becoming our Patreon or YouTube members. The links are down below. Thanks so much for watching. See you tomorrow.
We won't succumb to their tricks, the facade they try to sell. Their twisted words and feeble claims on us all they cannot quell. We see through their lies, their feeble attempts to sway. We do not believe